In those days, the Crest was in service to Steward Captain Auxilia of the Drift. Discovering the glowing runes on the maddened crew of the Undania, our brothers and sisters quickly realized those runes would lead to an arcane explosion that would destroy the ship and themselves. The lieutenant, sensing that the sailors' life forces powered the runes, ordered those poor souls dispatched, thereby saving the ship and themselves. Even the new recruits did their duty without flinching. Further in the hold, they discovered the Wraith, with more of the sailors in its thrall. After a brief skirmish, which saw our brothers and sisters battered and bruised, the lieutenant subdued the Wraith and freed the sailors from its thrall. After the battle, Master Sergeant Irongull ordered a search of the ship. They discovered a locked hold toward the bow, and after the bar was removed, they found the remainder of the ship's crew, as well as its captain, exhausted, emaciated, but alive. Welcome back for another episode of Errant Adventures. As always, I'm your game master and solo player, Steve Morrison. On this week's episode, the Crest concludes their mission on the Undania, but Benn discovers there's more work to be done. Find out what happens on Episode 3, Hands Dealt. Irongull stands in the entryway to this hold in the bow of the ship, and he stares around at these tired, emaciated sailors who are looking up at him with fearful eyes, maybe a little bit of hope, as he does not appear to have that same deranged, mad look that their fellow sailors had. And the captain, emaciated and weak from days without food and looking around, probably a couple days without water at this point, struggles forward, standing. Her uniform is filthy, and she looks like she's about to tip over. And when Irongull says, "What's going on here?" the captain says, "Who are you?" And Irongull says, "Master Sergeant Irongull of the Crest. We were hired to find out what happened to this ship and to get rid of the haunting that was afflicting this ship. We've done that. And now I'm trying to determine what happened here." The captain steps forward. She begins to fall, and Irongull, although he's an older man, is quick on his feet and catches her. And she says, "I appreciate that. I am Steward Seta, and this is my ship, the Undania. We were on a simple patrol, and I don't know quite what happened, but we were a few days out from harbor when there were screams from below deck, and I'm not entirely sure what happened after that." And Irongull says, "It's all right. We took care of the Wraith. It's no longer an issue. We should get you some food and water, and there will be plenty of time to talk these things through once you've regained some of your strength." and he is going to lead her out onto deck and give orders to the rest of the Crest soldiers to assist in whatever way they can. They start pulling out rations. I think in the rest of their search of the ship, they found some spots where there were barrels of water and food rations. And they begin distributing this out to these weakened and sick sailors. An hour or so passes as they spend a little bit of time administering to the sailors and giving them food and water, as Steward Seta is watching over her sailors. She looks around and she says, "What became of the rest, the ones who went mad?" Iron Gull says, "Some of them are fine. They're alive. Unfortunately, a few of them died in the process of us boarding. You can see to their bodies in the future here. What I want to know, Steward, is why. Why was this wraith aboard?" And the steward shrugs and says, "I don't know. We were returning, like I said, on a standard patrol. We were just returning from our route. We had taken on cargo and we were transporting it back to Hartvale when all of a sudden some of the sailors started going mad, and then there was this horrific shrieking sound that was coming from deeper in the hold. Before we knew what happened, most of the crew had been ushered into that hold and locked in with very minimal supplies, just whatever we had on us at the time. Fortunately, a few of the crew had some water skins that we were able to ration throughout the rest of the next few days, but there is no reason why they would have done this. I have sailed with these people for years. I don't know what happened." Iron Gull says, It's all right. It's all right, Steward. Whatever happened, there was some foul magics at play. Fortunately, the Crest is on task, and we will figure this out. You just rest." And he is going to go to Lephalia, and they are going to conference for a few moments. And after a few minutes, he waves Benn over. And Benn leaves his spot where he was, guarding those sailors that tried to escape. They've now kind of been sent back to rejoin the rest of the crew, and Benn walks over to Iron Gull, who looks him up and down and says, "I need you to," and he kind of like looks around a little bit, "slip into the captain's quarters and do a little bit of looking around." Benn says, "And what exactly am I looking for, sir?" Iron Gull says, "Any documents, anything that might be important, anything that might relate to the Vidala family." And he looks over at those crates that Benn identified the emblem of before and says, "The lieutenant and I agree that there was some sort of foul business here. And it seems most likely that that originated from the Vidala, since they sent those crates back to Hartvale. Since I know you can read, I want you to look around and see if you can find any documents or anything while we take care of the rest of the crew." And then he looks at Benn and says, "Make sure to keep this quiet. I don't want the steward to know that we're going through her personal correspondence." Benn nods and wanders off. Benn makes his way towards the captain's quarters. and we are going to jump into our next scene, which is going to be rifle through the steward's correspondence. And we are going to roll a d10 to see what our scene setup, how it plays out. And this is going to be a chaos factor of 6 for this scene, as our chaos factor has gone down as things have become more and more under control. So I'm going to go ahead and roll my d10 here. And I got a 9, which is above our chaos factor, so it plays out as expected. So Benn enters the captain's quarters, and I think he doesn't have to make any sort of roll to see if he can get in there carefully or without being seen, because I think he is there's enough going on that he doesn't necessarily need to be hidden in a sort of traditional way. He just sort of walks up to the door, takes a quick look around to make sure that nobody's watching, opens the door, slips inside, and shuts the door behind him. He is then going to look around the room, and we're going to go ahead and study a situation. So we are going to roll our 2d6 and add our sly, which is 1. That's an 8 plus 1 is a 9. So we're going to get to ask 2 questions. So I think the first question that we're going to ask is, what am I missing? So what is Benn missing here? As he looks around, as he's rifling through, is there any sort of correspondence from the Vidala family that is hidden here in the steward's quarters? Let's ask the fate chart. I think it is almost impossible. I don't think that this is corruption. I don't think the steward was in league with the Vidala family. I think that whatever happened without the steward's knowledge. So we're going to say it is impossible. And we're going to roll against our chaos rank of 6. 75, which is no. So there is nothing, there is no correspondence here that is from the Vidala family. So what else could we be missing? Is there any sort of correspondence whatsoever? I think it is 50-50. 76 with our 50-50 is going to be a no. No, there is no correspondence here that relates to any of this. So I think what he determines from that is that there's nothing he's missing as far as the steward having something to do with this or having some letter that relates to this situation. So I'm going to say there's nothing missing that he's missing here. And then the other thing that we can ask, the other question, is going to be who or what could be a useful opportunity for me. Let's just go ahead and ask the fate chart again. Is there something useful here? And I think it is very likely. 0-1. That is not only a yes, but an exceptional yes. So there is something of great import here. And let's find out what that is by rolling on action and subject. So I've got 14 for the action, abandon, and 45, abandon illness. Abandon illness. Okay, so in the course of Benn searching the steward's quarters, he discovers a small chest hidden underneath the bed. It's like lashed to the deck underneath the steward's bed. And he pulls it out, and it's locked, of course. But he just so happens to be, let's say he picked up some skills while he was in the Hartvale Navy. He fell in with some people who were perhaps less than savory. And they taught him a thing or two. And he has carried with him since his time there the tools of the trade. And he is going to take a moment to pick open the lock. He opens it, and there is something inside. I think it is a vial or a series of vials. There are let's say there are 10 of them. There are 2 rows of 5 vials, and a couple of them, it looks like, have been used, but there are 7 that are still full. And he looks at this, he pops the lid on one and gives it a quick, careful smell. And I think he quickly realizes that it is some sort of very strong antitoxin. And he looks at it, looks around, and he is going to hesitate for a moment, think through. He hasn't discovered anything of use, but these antitoxins could be very useful to the Crest. And so he removes the vials and carefully wraps them in cloth and tucks them into his bag. And then he closes the box and returns it back to where it was underneath the bed. Satisfied that he has completed his search of this place, he is going to leave the room and return back to Iron Gull. I think Iron Gull is dissatisfied that there was no correspondence or anything of import that he found, but I think the sergeant is not surprised, and they are going to finish up sort of caring for the people. I think he sent a couple of the Crest soldiers rowing over to one of the other drift ships close to here to deliver the message that they should send aid of their own to the Andania. And after a few more hours, more boats arrive with drift sailors who come aboard to care for Captain Seta and the crew of the Andania. At that point, the lieutenant and Iron Gull and the rest of the Crest soldiers pile into their boat and row back to the docks and return to the Crow's Nest. So we have reached the conclusion of the first mission that Benn Weinstone, official, full mission that Benn Weinstone has gone on as a member of the Crest. And I think because of the way that SCUP is designed as powered by the Apocalypse game, you are supposed to do these experience advancement checks at the end of every session. But because my sessions are relatively short when compared to, your standard game length, I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm going to check for advancement at the end of a mission. So in this case, we are going to walk through a couple of advancement questions, and we are going to make some marks and kind of set things up for the next mission. So first of all, something that I did not do at the start of this mission was highlight a stat. And that is something that you do in SCUP, where you highlight one of your stats, and the first time every scene that you roll it, you get an advancement point. So I think it makes sense that I would have highlighted Sly, which is the stat that revolves around studying a situation, studying a person. It's the more investigative stat. And since I knew that Benn was going into a situation where he was going to have to discover some of these things, it makes sense to me that he would have had to highlight that stat. So I'm going to say that's the case. And then as part of this advancement, we are going to look at our highlighted stat So I can actually highlight 2 stats, but since I forgot to do that the first time around, I'm just going to leave it at the 1 stat for now, as I think Sly makes sense, and I won't worry about the second one. The first time a player rolls a highlighted stat in a scene, they mark 1 advancement point. So I definitely did that at least twice. I think it's probably more than that, but I'm going to try to be fair on this, and I'm going to give myself 2 points, 2 marks for advancement. Entanglements, once per session, or in this case, once per mission. Each class features 3 entanglements. At the start of each session, the MC will choose one of the 3 options. During the session, if your PC does what the highlighted option stipulates, the MC will give you an advancement point. So I did do this, so I selected steal something valuable or important from someone powerful. And I think taking those vials from Steward Seta counts as stealing something valuable or important from someone powerful. So I'm going to mark another advancement point for that. Using an honor move once per session. I did not do any honor moves this session. And then the final one is specific moves. Some moves give you advancement points when you trigger them. I don't have any that did that, or I didn't use any that did that. So we're going to leave it at that. So I'm sitting at 3 advancement points. Now, I just said that about honor and honor moves, and that is another part of this game that we haven't really used yet. So gaining honor basically is a representation of what your character's perceived status is in this world. And so my character, Benn Winestone, started with 1 honor, and you can spend that honor to do a couple of different moves, like trying to get somebody to do something for you because they've heard about you. You can use it to call on your faction to help you out when you're in trouble. You can also use it to refuse an obligation. So when my patron ordered me to do something, I could have spent some honor, rolled to try and resist that. And then you gain honor throughout the course of the game. So you can gain honor through a variety of ways. So specifically, if you do any of the following: if you tangibly advance the interests, agenda, or standing of your faction, if you make a new connection with someone who may find you useful or desirable, demonstrated your power, talent, wisdom, or skill to others, spread rumors, secrets, or information to those who need or want it. So for each of those, you would gain 1 honor added to your current total. So definitely gained 1 honor for tangibly advancing the interests, agenda, or standing of the faction, because Benn was able to identify the merchant family by their emblem and was able to help keep the lieutenant safe and fulfill their mission to de-haunt the drift ship Andania. So we're going to mark 1 for that. I don't think he made any new connections with somebody who could find him useful or desirable. Demonstrated your power, talent, wisdom, or skill to others. I think that is an interesting question, and I think it's a great question for the fate chart. So we are going to just say 50-50 on this. 98 is an exceptional no. So definitely did not impress the lieutenant, and maybe not even Iron Gull. So we're definitely not going to mark 1 for that. So this is just going to increase his honor up to 2. And like I said before, he can spend that probably in the next mission to try and do something. That is about it for advancement as it goes in SCUP. However, since I'm also using the Mythic GM emulator, part of that is setting these scenes and playing out these scenes, and then also updating a list of characters and a list of threads. And the threads are currently investigate the haunted drift ship and discover why the Vidala family tried to recruit a sailor from the Andania. So we can mark off the investigate the haunted drift ship. We've completed that thread. So now we just have the one thread of discover why the Vidala family tried to recruit a sailor from the Andanya. And we will add more threads to that as we continue to work through this season and as we discover new things that are going on in the city. As far as characters, I have listed Iron Gull. I've got listed Lephalia. I have the Vidala family as a character. And then I'm also going to put Steward Seta, and by extension, the crew of the Andanya. So those are all characters who could potentially show back up again, depending on our roles when we set up our scene. Benn is sitting at 3 harm, which will heal over time. There isn't a specific move for regaining health when it's 3 or below on the harm chart. Once you get up to 4 harm or 5 harm, then you have to start actually making rolls to, go see a surgeon or something like that. But in this case, those 3 harm will eventually just heal over time. So I'm not going to mark them down yet because we don't know how quickly things are going to move. And Benn is also sitting at 3 out of 5 advancement points. So he's not going to advance this time around, and that's okay. So Ben and the others return to the crow's nest, and they are slowly debriefing as they get into the evening. The lieutenant has gone to report into the captain, and the sergeant takes everybody else around, sits them down at a table, and they talk through the events of the day. Once that's done, Sergeant Irongull releases them to their liberty for the evening, and Ben... What does Ben do? Does Ben stick around, or does he go elsewhere? I think it is probably likely that he is going to take a walk, that he wants to get out, clear his head a little bit, and just take some time to think through the events of the day. And that's going to be our next scene, is Ben takes a walk to clear his head. Chaos factor is down to 5. We'll kind of reset it to neutral after they've returned to the crow's nest. And I'm going to roll my d10 to see how this plays out. A 5, which is equal to the chaos factor, and is an odd, so it is an altered scene. So it is the next logical scene idea. So I think he starts to leave. He starts to walk out to clear his head. And as he does so, one of the other recruits, one of the other new members of the Crest, comes alongside him and is like, Ben, where are you going? And let's give this person a name. So this guy's also from Heartvale. And let's call him Morrow. So Morrow comes up and is like, Ben, where are you going? And Ben says, I'm going out to catch some fresh air and think. Morrow says, well, stay here and let's play some cards and drink and talk about it. And Ben is hesitant to stay, but I think he realizes that he is on a precipice where he can go all in and be a part of the Crest here. And that means socializing, because I don't think that's something he's done to this point. I think he's kept himself pretty far apart from the other members of the Crest. I think he is somewhat aloof, and the others have noticed this, and maybe he's gotten some kickback from them on that. And I think he looks at Morrow and says, all right, I suppose I could stay for a card game or two. And Morrow says, great, come on over. And Ben follows him over to a table where there are a few other of the newer members of the Crest, younger members of the Crest. They haven't been around all that long. And he sits with them, and they are going to play cards and gamble and drink for the rest of the evening. Now, here's the question. Does Benn win or lose? And I'm going to ask the fate chart. Does he win at cards? Is he good at cards? And I'm going to say because his sly is 1, I think that's going to give him a little bit of an advantage, but because his wily is 0, it's not going to be a huge advantage. So I'm going to say it is somewhat likely that he wins. And we're going to roll against Chaos rank of 5. 53, which is on somewhat likely a yes. Yes, he does win. So they play a number of hands, and he is able to win a modest sum of coins from his fellows. And after the 5th or 6th game that he wins, the others kind of throw down their cards, and they're like, "Morrow, why did you invite this guy?" And Morrow kind of sheepishly shrugs and says, "I thought it would be nice to, have a new player." And Benn just kind of leans back and smiles and says, "I don't know what to tell you, my friends. I spent a good number of times playing cards in the Navy. Didn't the rest of you?" And those who are from Heartvale kind of grumble a little bit. And Benn then smiles again and says, "How about I lighten the load a bit and buy the next round?" And he gets up and walks over to the bar as the others sitting around the table kind of grumble and yeah, you should buy another round. And he walks over to the bar at the Crow's Nest and orders a round for the table. At this point, it's a little bit later in the evening. They got back from the Andanya, let's say around 5 o'clock, 5 p.m. in our time. So he's been here now sitting, playing into the evening. The sun is starting to set, and those red rays of dying sunlight are streaming in through the windows and casting the whole room in a sort of reddish hue. And as he's standing there, waiting for the drinks, he feels a presence next to him. And he turns, and the lieutenant is standing there, holding a glass of red wine. And Benn looks at her and then kind of looks away very quickly. And she says, "Is there a problem, fresh blood?" And Benn shakes his head and says, "No, ma'am, no problem." She says, "I get the sense that you are not being entirely honest with me. Tell me, go ahead. What's on your mind?" Benn turns and says, "Do you always use your sorcery in the presence of your fellows? Do you always put them in harm's way in that manner?" And she looks at him and she smiles, a cold, vicious smile. And she says, "Believe me, the true members of the Crest were in no danger from me. You didn't see Iron Gull stumble and fall. No, they are much more resilient than you. You are nothing. You are worse than nothing. You are a lie. You were not with us as we crossed the wilderness. You were not with us in Barata. You did not fight in the siege of Brescian Pass. You will never be one of us." Benn looks at her and says, "How does one become a member of the Crest, then? Do I have to wait for some grand battle to prove my worth? And she again smiles over the cup as she sips and says, "You cannot prove yourself to me. Have fun with your card game, fresh blood. The freshest blood is the best to spill." And then she turns and walks away. Benn shivers a little bit and returns back to the table with drinks in hand. His fellows seem to be a little bit more enthused to see him once he has returned with the drinks. And they spend the rest of the evening playing more cards, and he continues to take their earnings from them to the point where they then stop playing cards and decide to change up to a different game. They start dicing, and Benn loses a little bit of money before he begs off for the night. He leaves the Crow's Nest and makes his way down Filcher Street. He is walking and he feels that slight haze of alcohol as he spent a rather pleasant evening with the newer members of the Crest, and the words of the lieutenant trouble him because he wonders if all of the higher ranking officers in the Crest think as she does. Are these new recruits just fodder for their designs? Are they just fresh blood, easily spilt? And as he makes his way towards his small apartment, I think he wonders if there truly is a place in the Crest for those who have been recruited here in Heartvale, or if they're just pawns in some game that he doesn't yet understand. Now, my question is he being followed? I'm going to say it's 50-50. 75. No, he's not being followed. He has gone unnoticed. Perhaps this is a reflection of the fact that his deeds on the Andanya did not make an impression, as nobody has taken an interest in him. So he makes his way back to his apartment as the last little bits of light fade away. He stumbles into his room, lights a candle, pulls a small book from the shelf, and starts to read. The next day, Ben wakes and finds that there is a message from Iron Gull. And that message says to meet him at the Bloody Shield. Now, Ben is a native of this city, and he has grown up here, lived here all of his life, and he is not familiar with the Bloody Shield. So he goes out and asks around a little bit, and then is told that it is a location in the Grasp. And he gets an address and makes his way there. Now, Filcher Street, where the Crow's Nest is located, is in the Scales, which is the mercantile district of Heartvale. And his apartment is somewhere between the Scales and the Tame, which is the harbor district. The Grasp is on the sort of far side of Heartvale, away from the sea, and it is the poorer district in the city. So Benn makes his way across Heartvale and reaches the Bloody Shield and steps inside. As he steps inside, he sees that it is a very dirty, not well-maintained tavern in the Grasp. There are a few tables full of already drunken workers who worked the night shift on the docks and came in this morning and had their fill of drink, probably spending what little coin they earned overnight. And in one corner is seated Iron Gull. His cloak is tightly wrapped around him, and he is sitting with an untouched meal in front of him. Benn makes his way over and sits down. He says, "You wanted to see me, Sergeant?" And Iron Gull nods and says, "You want anything to eat?" Benn looks at the state of the food on the plate in front of Iron Gull and then just shakes his head. "Yeah, me either. I've eaten food like this before, and I don't have time for the after effects. Well, you did all right yesterday, kid. You made a good showing of yourself. I know it was a difficult situation. Good catch on the Vidala family. And for finding that letter." "Yes, Sergeant, I'm glad I was able to be of service." "Yeah. Benn, you're different than the other recruits that have come in from Heartvale." "Oh?" "Yeah. You have a different way of speaking, a different way of thinking. You have education." Benn sort of doesn't say anything, just kind of looks down at the table. "Look, I don't care what your background is. I don't care what your history is. I don't care who you are or who your parents are. All I care about is the Crest. When we recruit people, we recruit them to fill a need. Sometimes that need is to march in line, to draw their blade and cut down who we say to cut down. But sometimes we recruit someone because of their other potential, their other skills. I think you've got other skills, kid, and I want to put those to use." Benn says, "I'm at your service, of course." "Yeah, of course. Listen." And he looks around a little bit. Very clearly chose the Bloody Shield because it is not a place where the Crest have a presence. And it is not a place where there are a whole lot of eyes and ears, especially where he's chosen to sit. There isn't another table within 3 or 4 paces, and even the closest tables are all empty. Iron Gull says, "When we came here to lick our wounds, replenish our numbers, and make some coin. And we were hired by our benefactor to do a couple of jobs. Well, we are starting to get a better picture of the city. Based on everything I said before, and based on your specific skill set, I think you might be a good fit for the task I have in mind. We're starting to get drawn into a game of politics. And we need to know what we're facing and what we're looking at. I want you to be my eyes and ears out there. I want you to find out who the players are, because you may already know some of them. I want you to figure out what's going on in the city. And I want you to let me know so that we can keep the Crest either out of it or in it enough to make coin for all of us." Benn nods and says, "I understand, Sergeant. You are correct, by the way. There is a game afoot in Heartvale and has been since the city was founded. The players change, but the game stays the same. It is all about control, power, victory. Always has been, and it always will be. Iron Gull nods and says, "Yeah, I kind of figured. That's sort of how it is all over." Benn chuckles a little bit and says, "I suppose it is. Well, there's a reason I joined the Crest, as opposed to doing so many other things I could have done with my life. I have sworn the oath. I am here to serve. Tell me what I'm to do." Iron Gull says, "This shipment that Vidala sent, we don't know why, but whatever they sent, it caused that wraith to appear. The lieutenant is sure of it. And whatever happened to the crew, whatever made them mad, could have happened to others. She's pretty sure on that, too. That means it's possible that whoever sent that shipment knew that that's exactly what was going to happen to that ship and intended them to get back to Heartvale with whatever it was that caused that to happen. If that's the case, then there's somebody out there who wants to cause havoc and chaos. There's somebody out there that wants to destroy the Drift, possibly Heartvale itself. Now, our benefactor, they want us to find out who did this. They want us to find out why. And most importantly, they want us to make them suffer. Do you think you can do that?" And Benn says, "Yes. Yes, I think I can." Thanks for listening to Errant Adventures, and thanks so much to Syrinscape for the lovely ambient sounds and music throughout the episode. If you enjoyed the show, please tell anyone and everyone in your life about it. And if you haven't already, please rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app. It really does help others find me. If you want to interact with me, my handle on Instagram and Twitter is @ErrantSoloPod, or you can email me at errantsolopod@gmail.com. I also post short fiction and campaign-related materials on my website, errantadventurespod.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.